Outbreaks can no longer be easily contained by geography. Oh, what an ominous statement that is. This comes from the same CDC that told you don't worry, be happy when Ebola was killing tens of thousands of people. That's given you no significant guidelines for Zika other than, oh, yeah, drain those low-lying areas in your backyard, make sure there's nothing gathering water. Oh, don't worry, you'll be fine, we'll spray chemicals everywhere. Everything will soon be in order. Zika made its way to Miami Beach now, but don't be concerned, people, because even though it's transmitted by mosquitoes and by sex, and probably by other vectors as well, that we don't quite fully understand, if the Utah case is any indication, don't get your panties in a wad. Now they're actually telling you to worry, though, a little bit about yellow fever because, it might make its way to Asia because they've run out of vaccine, basically. What they're doing now is diluting the vaccine to 1/5 of its normal effectiveness to give protection, keep people from dying, I guess. Give people some protection without giving them full protection because they're so close to running out. And it's going to take 6 months for them to get more. Oh, they were so well prepared. You see, here's the real problem with, globalism. The one good thing they could be doing is trying to clamp down on disease. We should be eradicating them one by one like we did with smallpox. It wouldn't really cost that much more in terms of manpower and resources and money than we already spend on these programs. But instead, what do? They get caught with their pants down 3 times in 2 years. They get caught with their pants down on Ebola. They even had to admit it because it was so bungled. They get caught with their pants down with Zika. They've got no idea how to respond. All this chemical spraying and stuff in Florida, it's just to allay the fears of the public. It's not actually going to stop it from becoming endemic. It will become endemic. That is a guarantee. I can tell you with 100% certainty, Zika will become endemic in the southern parts of the United States. It's only a matter of time. This is a stopgap measure that will do nothing long term because it's a sexually transmitted disease also. It can crop up time and time again unless you start blasting these people who are infected in the face with pesticide and killing them too. It's not going to mean anything. Get used to Zika being down there and probably a lot further north than that as well, at least seasonally. But now the CDC and WHO are gravely concerned that this could make its way to Asia, where people have no resistance to the pathogen. They have no resistance to yellow fever because they've never been hit with a widespread outbreak before. I imagine that China and India and these other places that are conducive to yellow fever but don't actually have it, at least in widespread manner, where we've got generations who have never experienced it at all, I imagine that the population would respond a little bit like how the Native Americans dealt with smallpox, as in probably 1 billion people would keel over. It wouldn't be pretty. It would weaken the entire population. You'd see quite a bit of collapse and calamity there. Probably things would escalate into civil war in some of these regions. People would be convinced it was the end times. Plenty of superstitious people left in the world. There are plenty of people here in the so-called civilized Western world who they claim the end times is here every time there's a meteor shower. Meteor shower? Oh, Satan's coming. Outbreak of bubonic plague at Yellowstone? Oh, end times. Yellowstone fish die-off. Oh, apocalypse, supervolcano. They don't have a clue what they're talking about, quite clearly, but at the same time, you convince enough people that this is true. Maybe at some point they just snap. They go crazy. It's probably the biggest concern after the epidemic itself. But they don't even have enough vaccine to control this outbreak. They get caught with their pants down yet again. Why are we bothering to fund these groups? I understand that they're necessary. The big problem of globalization is that one element of globalization actually is necessary. If you don't want to have a pandemic wipe out half the world's population and knock us all back to the Iron Age or something, I think we can debate over whether that's a good idea or not, but certainly those who are less misanthropic and nihilistic have to agree. You do have to clamp down on disease. Now, I think we should gear that towards slowly eradicating disease after disease. Like, why haven't we gotten rid of rabies? It's not like it's not within our capability. Why didn't we wipe out polio? It's resurging in places like Pakistan and Syria. We almost had it eradicated. We should have it eradicated. There's no reason for it to continue to exist since its primary host is the human being and some rodents that are easily taken care of. But no, we had to have civil war here and strife there. And then fucking doctors were vaccinating people in Afghanistan with fake vaccine to spy on the Taliban. And all this bullshit. Don't you think there's enough risk in the world already? I think that an epidemic is probably the only thing other than a nuclear war that's likely to bring us to our knees. Now, in either case, I don't expect all of humanity to die. There'll be survivors, whether even if it were like super rabies, like airborne rabies. I know that they say 100% lethal. There'd still be like that 1/100th of 1% that would survive. Somehow mankind would make it through because there's so many of them. Or maybe it'd mutate and become inert, inoculate part of some remote population, and they'd be the ones repopulating. Nuclear war, yeah, there are people with bunkers. There are people in rural areas that are far enough from the fallout. There are people in small islands in the South Pacific. They wouldn't get irradiated at all because of their remote location. That's true. And I think we need to put a little bit more concern into this. I think this is probably the one thing that the global community should pull together on. I believe strongly in nation states. I don't believe in globalism. I don't believe in a controlled global economy. Yeah, global trade, yes, but not a controlled global economy. No central planning of a global economy. No central authority or court. No central military authority, certainly. The idea of like having an EU army is retarded, just like the concept of member states donating all their troops to NATO instead of keeping their own militaries and just doing that tangentially. It'd be a retarded idea that nobody would like. No central social control, no central censorship. The internet should not be centralized. I don't believe in centrality because it's inefficient. But on this one thing, perhaps, I would be wrong to say I didn't support a global effort. Because it's the most no-brain situation. Diseases they ignore borders. So what's the purpose of, not ignoring them for the purposes of disease? That'd be like saying here in the U.S., oh, well, we wiped out polio here. What are these people complaining about? Well, yeah, but then the disease is still there. It comes back to haunt you eventually. And unfortunately, diseases, once in a great while, they mutate and get a lot worse. Look at what happened with the Spanish flu. What happens if that happens again? What happens if 10% of the world's population suddenly keels over? In the age of the internet, with so many end times doomsday survivalist prophets on the internet, you're going to have a hell of a lot of shooting going on, not just the epidemic itself to deal with. So you've got a big fucking problem if that happens. Yeah, it'll be a problem if yellow fever wipes out, 10% of the Chinese population. I think you can't even comprehend of how many corpses would have to be buried. It'd be a little bit like the Black Death. But this really is the fault of these central organizations and the governments donating to and groups overseeing and administering them, because apparently they didn't have enough vaccine. Oh, la-di-da-di-da, we're so worried about Zika, we don't have time for that fucking yellow fever vaccine. They say, oh, well, it's no longer containable by geographic borders. Well, yeah, neither was the Spanish flu. You're acting like this is the first time in human history where population density and travel have been high and speedy enough collectively for something like this to happen. It happened with the Black Death back in the friggin' Middle Ages. We're talking back when the fastest mode of travel was a ship with good sails or a horse galloping down the road. And there weren't even any paved roads in most of these countries. They were all just dirt paths, and people lived in little swampy hovels with dirt floors and heated their homes with cow shit. So don't tell me that it can't. It certainly can happen. It doesn't matter how much sanitation you have. It helps. It helps to prevent domestic disease from spreading, but what if it comes in from abroad? What if yellow fever hits the United States? We could have an outbreak too with low resistance. And Zika managed to get in here. It's not like there's anything that we're doing now that's going to stop it anyway, unless we start spraying DDT, which is about the most inert pesticide we could use and probably what we should be doing. But no, Greenpeace says we can't because it's toxic to eagles, even though it's not. Even though you could probably drink a shot of DDT and you'd be just fine. This stuff they're spraying now, you drink a shot of that, it's going to treat you the same way that getting hit in the face with nerve gas would treat you. So take stock of the situation before you think the government's got it all figured out. No, it's downright ominous to hear a usually overly optimistic smiling face at the CDC say, oh yeah, we can't contain this geographically anymore. We got a big problem. We're almost out of vaccine. There are some issues to work through here. And they have a tendency, by the way, to understate danger. It's like, remember with Ebola, what did they do? Oh, well, don't worry, people. It's difficult to transmit. Yeah, just ignore the fact that we're wearing like double hazmat suits right now to handle this Ebola patient. And we promise it's not highly infectious. We can just bring people that are infected here to treat them. It's a great idea. First time Ebola's been on U.S. soil. We'll just do that. We're lucky that it didn't have an outbreak, at least locally, when they brought it to Texas. I'll tell you that much for certain. With Zika, they act like it's no big deal. On the one hand, they act like it's the end of the world. We must tackle it now. And on the other hand, they say, oh yeah, but, we're just going to spray this area and that area. And they're not doing what they actually would need to do to stop it. It's so inept. It's so retarded. Any randomly selected person with almost no understanding of epidemiology could probably do a better idea if they were given the tools to do it. You know what I would do? I'd immediately gas the whole countryside with DDT down there in the whole infected area. I would quarantine anybody who had it, and I would try to conduct tests, see, well, maybe you shouldn't have sex until we figure this out. Do what they did in Africa. Now, CDC had no problem quarantining them because they were brown people, they were third world, but try to do that here. Violating our rights. Oh, but keep spraying neurotoxins on us. That's not a violation of anybody's human rights. I just don't get it. Then I'd offer DDT to all these African countries that have been begging for it for the last 30 years. Oh, well, we want to combat malaria. Let's get rid of the mosquitoes. Sorry, we can't give you DDT. Government says we can't give it to you. Make your own DDT. Figure out how to manufacture it, make it your goddamn self. That's my recommendation to these third world nations that probably could desperately use it. DDT was a good thing for this country, by the way. It wasn't a bad thing for us. Oh, it cut down so many odd diseases in the areas that we gassed, wiped out so many diseases in some of these areas. It was great. The lifespan shot right ahead. Oh, it was wonderful. We should be manufacturing 10 times as much DDT. If we were, I'd take a vial of DDT and I'd dump it all over my head right here on video just to show people how little I give a shit. But do you think I would do that with the chemicals they're spraying right now in Florida? Hell no. I'd be wearing my gas mask if I was down there right now. I'd be wearing it at all. I'd be sleeping in it because of the hazardous nature of these chemicals they're spraying. You think they care about your safety? You think they care about stopping the epidemic of Zika there? If they did, they would bring DDT back. But they haven't now, have they? They don't care. As far as yellow fever goes, yeah, it'll probably explode out of Africa and hit Asia. Probably get there. All it takes is one person to get bitten. Unfortunately, some of these countries lack the capability to properly respond to that. It hits Cambodia or something like that. Densely populated Southeast Asian nation without a particularly high standard of living, low sanitation. It hits the Philippines, a little more advanced, yeah, but there are also a lot of slums everywhere where people don't really have medical access. You got very densely populated population with a lot of mosquitoes in these areas. Oh, it hits, some outer region of China, some densely populated industrial mining town forgotten by the Han Chinese over in the more developed coastal region. Or it hits some slum in India, it hits Bombay. Or it hits Hyderabad or one of these places, or hits Burma or Vietnam. Oh, it'd be a calamity. It'd kill tens of millions of people fairly quickly. It would be bad. It would be pretty sad for them. Then again, you get like super rabies outbreak, Ebola, any of these diseases. I remember a few weeks ago they were reporting, Ebola case in India. It turned out not to be Ebola. It was just like a Marburg virus, I believe, like similar symptoms to Ebola. I think the patient died, unfortunately. But everyone they were terrified. And I don't blame them. I don't blame somebody with a medical infrastructure like that available to them. I don't blame them for being terrified of the concept of a hemorrhagic virus landing there. And I wouldn't blame them for being terrified of the Yellow Death coming and killing half their children. I really wouldn't. So it's rather ominous when the CDC tells you there's a problem, because usually they won't admit it. That's about all. Peace out.